What's up, guys? It's Reaper Doc. I got a sweet one for you. I've been working on this for a really long time. I wanted to do a 2022 OEM 450 shootout for you. I took all the bikes from the 2022 pack, as well as the Alta and the KTM from the last OEM pack, because it wasn't in the 2022 pack, and I put them on 3 different tracks. We did Alita V2, we did the Sandbox, and we did Hangtown. I then ran a bunch of laps on all the bikes, and I got a bunch of statistics together so that we can go over all that. At the end of the video, I rank all the bikes from 10th to 1st. So stay tuned for that. And if you like the video, please thumbs up, because if you want me to do another one, I'll do a 250, I'll do a 125, but let me know that in the comments. And if you really like the video, consider subscribing. All right, let's jump right into it. The Alta had a fast lap of a 143.990, an average lap time of a 144.692, and an ideal lap time of 142.758. This was hands down the worst bike on this track. While it handled well and seemed to have infinite traction, it severely lacked in overall power. It feels like you're riding a 250 at times. I guess if you're looking to move from the 250 to the 450 class, maybe this is a good starter bike, but probably not, as it's pretty much garbage. The 2021 TM had a fast lap of 141.592, an average lap of 144.377, and an ideal lap time of 141.347. This bike was very meh to me. Like, it did nothing terrible, but it did nothing great. I'm sure you could help the bike with some suspension changes or engine tuning, but out of the box, it was pretty boring. I don't really know what to say about it other than it was just very okay, I guess. The Gas had a fast lap of a 140.069, an average lap of a 141.704, and an ideal lap of 139.238. While the Gas had tons of power, turned well, and just felt solid all around, it was really hard to control for me and caused me to crash a lot. I think with some suspension tuning, this could absolutely be one of the best bikes in the game, but in its stock configuration, dude, she was a lot to hold on to, so be prepared for that. The Suzuki dropped a fast lap of 138.620, an average lap of 143.330, and an ideal lap of 138.382. With solid power and decent suspension, this felt like a great entry bike into the 450 class, but the lack of power in comparison to some of the other bikes and the extremely heavy and wide steering feel, this kind of feels like you're steering a herd of cattle, to be honest. Will hold the Suzuki back from ever being top tier. I guess that's what happens when you continue to make the same bike year after year after year. The Honda's fast lap was 138.174. It had an average of 142.892, an ideal of 137.213. The Honda felt extremely stable, almost too stable, where it kind of felt like the bike had a steering stabilizer on that won't allow you to turn quick out of ruts or just make tight turns at all. Kind of steers like a boat. Suspension felt really good and didn't deflect or feel nervous. It had good controllable power. Overall, solid choice for the Sandbox track. The Husky ran a fast lap of a 140.893, an average lap of 142.366, an ideal lap of 136.748. The Husky has insane power. It feels extremely light and like you can put the bike wherever you want it. The front suspension would absorb whatever I threw at it, but in its stock configuration, the rear wheels seemed to deflect off everything, which made it really hard to be consistent. So while I think the Husky might be one of the best bikes on this track, maybe with some tuning in its stock configuration, it's pretty hard to be consistent. The 2021 KTM ran a fast lap of 138.140, an average lap of 139.839, an ideal lap of 137.573. The KTM felt a lot like the Husky, where it had tons of power and could turn really well, but almost too much so. I felt like I had to be really careful on the throttle and be very precise on what lines I took, or I would crash. I think with some tuning, those problems could be fixed though, and it'd be a great bike. The Fantic had a fast lap of 138.227, an average lap of 138.568, an ideal lap of 137.658. This bike was a huge surprise to me. It was really consistent and seemed to suit this track really well. Really solid all around. I guess it did struggle a little bit with hard landings. It doesn't have the most power out of any 450, but it's a pretty solid 450 for this track. The Yamaha had a fast lap of 136.454, an average lap of 141.961, an ideal lap of 136.454. With the fastest lap on the sandbox, it's clear that the Yamaha is a solid pick, but it was really inconsistent for me. The insane amount of power and nervous feeling suspension either made me ride overly conservative or crash. But man, if you can put all the pieces together, this bike absolutely rips. The Kawasaki was my #1 pick for the sandbox, running a fast lap of 137.111, an average lap of 138.505, an ideal lap of 136.279. This bike just seemed to do everything right. It had solid power, turned great, suspension soaked everything up, and with the best ideal lap and best average lap, it has the potential to be insanely fast while still being super consistent. Again, at the bottom of the leaderboard, we have the Alta. The Alta's fast lap was a 129.399, average lap was 130.792, and its ideal lap was a 128.636. These aren't necessarily terrible times, but in comparison to the other bikes, the Alta was just underpowered again, and on a flat open track like Polita, you really notice that lack of power. Fantic had a fast time of 128.227, an average lap of 130.565, an ideal lap of 125.334. This bike really surprised me again, but not in a good way like it did on Sandbox. The bike felt really unstable and twitchy on Polita. The issue where the Fanatic doesn't like to absorb hard landings was highlighted on Polita like crazy. Since I feel like to go fast on this track, you have to over jump a ton of jumps. It just didn't like to soak any of it up. The TM had a fast lap of 126.292, an average lap of 127.994, an ideal lap of 125.723. The TM was yet again very meh. I don't really know how to say it other than just meh. I feel like it was better here than it was at Sandbox, but still just didn't do anything great. I did notice that my front end felt like it wanted to push in every corner, so I had to be way more timid than I usually would be to avoid crashing. The Yamaha had a fast lap of 127.336, an average lap of 129.019, an ideal lap of 125.773. This was another huge surprise for me. After doing so well at the Sandbox, I thought for sure it would be a front runner on this track, but I think the insane amount of power made the bike really hard to control on such a slick track. The Suzuki had a fast lap of 126.529, average lap of 128.711, an ideal lap of 125.466. On such an open and fast track, I really noticed the lack of power the Suzuki had. The front end also wanted to push like the TM, and the rear end seemed to deflect more than I would like. Again, the Suzuki seems like it'd be a good middle of the pack bike, but I don't think it'll ever get out of that middle area. With a fast lap of 126.451, an average lap of 128.337, and an ideal lap of 125.979. The 21 KTM has the potential to be really good, but very similar to the Sandbox track, the bike needs tons of patience to ride well. The KTM takes that slow is fast approach in my opinion, but it has the potential to be amazing. It just needs some work. The Honda came in with a fast lap of 126.281, an average lap of 127.604, an ideal lap of 125.694. The boat-like turning experience and overall overly stable feeling actually really helped the bike at Polita. Polita doesn't have a ton of tight turns or situations where you need to turn out of a rut early, so that easy to use power the Honda has and a solid feel made it do pretty well at Polita. The Gas turned a fast lap of 126.473, an average lap of 126.866, and an ideal lap time of 125.784. I feel like this bike has a bigger learning curve than the other bikes, but its skill ceiling seems higher as well. It seems overly sensitive to both the throttle and lean input, but once you understand how it works, the bike is really amazing. The more time I spent on it, the more I liked it. Moving on to the Kawasaki, it turned a fast lap of 125.044, an average lap of 126.527, and an ideal lap of 124.664. This is the first ideal lap breaking into the 124s, and the Cowie just felt solid all around. It turns great, great power. At times, it did feel like it could be a little unpredictable, but I'm sure with some suspension changes and tweaks, we could fix that. Husqvarna put down blistering fast lap of 124.416, an average lap of 124.641, an ideal lap 124.126. With the fastest lap, the best average lap, and the best ideal lap, it's clear the Husqvarna was the best bike for Polita. I never felt uncomfortable or sketchy at all while riding the Husky. It just felt amazing at all times. All inconsistency that I had, I'm pretty sure was just rider error the whole time. In last place, yet again, we have the Alta with the fastest lap of 2:01.114, an average lap of 2:03.007, and an ideal lap of 2 minutes flat 6:28. The Alta just couldn't handle the elevation on Hangtown or the big boy jumps. It still handles really well and is the easiest bike to ride, but you won't be breaking any records on this eco-friendly machine. The Honda had a fast lap of 1:58.982, an average lap of 2 minutes 2:65, and an ideal lap of 1:56.908. The pretty good ideal time. You would think that this bike would have done better, but with the rear end breaking loose constantly and the super wide steering, it just really struggled at Hangtown. Hangtown's got a lot of tight corners, and it just didn't really perform that well. The TM dropped a 1:56.887 as its fast lap, an average lap of 2:01.082, and a pretty decent ideal lap of 1:55.312. While I feel like the bike has great potential, it just feels off for me. Like the other tracks, it's very bland and just doesn't do it for me. Sorry, my light blue Italian friend, but I won't be picking you for my 450 of choice. The Suzuki's fast lap was 1:55.655, an average lap of 2 minutes 0.823, and an ideal lap of 1:55.462. I felt like I struggled a lot to keep the front end under me on the Suzuki. It just wanted to push out everywhere. I noticed a lack of power too on some of the big jumps. With some tweaking, I think the Suzuki can be solid, but I think it'll remain middle of the pack no matter what you do to it. With a fast lap of 1:55.691, an average lap of 1:59.307, an ideal lap of 1:55.503, the Cowie breaks into the pack of bikes consistently able to run sub 2-minute lap times. The suspension seemed to really not like any acceleration bumps or braking bumps, and it liked to deflect off of everything. But overall, seems to be getting to, now we're into the solid bikes. The Yamaha had a fast lap of 1:55.968, an average lap of 1:59.235, and an ideal lap of 1:54.992. Just like the previous tracks, the Yamaha had potential to be insanely fast, but its extremely harsh engine and extremely harsh suspension held it back in my opinion. Had to be really timid in order to be consistent, but with some tweaks, I think the Yamaha could be really good. The Fantic ran a 1:55.887 for its fast lap, averaged 1:57.524, and had an ideal lap of 1:55.480. The Fantic felt really nervous and harsh through the bumps and chatter on the track, almost the complete opposite how it felt at the sandbox. It felt really stable there, and so it was really weird to me and surprised me a lot how uncomfortable I felt on the Fantic at Hangtown. Husqvarna had a fast lap of 1:56.024, an average lap of 1:59.035, and an ideal lap of 1:54.199. The suspension worked so well on Hangtown, I felt like this was the easiest bike to not crash and to be consistent on. With some suspension changes, this could easily be the best bike on the track. It just, as well as it worked, I felt like it just was a little bit deflective, but still the best bike, I think, overall suspension wise. The Red Husky, or the Red KTM, had a fast lap of 1:55.661, an average lap of 1:58.001, and an ideal lap of 1:55.607. This bike is like a fine wine, man. It just gets better and better with time. The more time I spend on this bike, the more I understand how it wants to be ridden. I was able to turn the fastest lap on Hangtown with this bike, but its inconsistencies kept it out of that #1 spot. The 2001 KTM had a fast lap of 156.011, an average lap of 157.271, and an insanely fast ideal lap of 153.986. With the best average lap and an insanely fast ideal lap, the KTM really surprised me by being the overall best bike at Hangtown. I feel like some of the other bikes could definitely outperform the KTM with some tweaks here and there, but in the stock configuration, the KTM really shined over at Hangtown. Now that we have all those statistics, let's see how I ranked each bike. Let me know in the comments what bike you think deserves the #1 spot. In 10th place, we have the Alta. Unfortunately, the lack of power will keep this bike at the bottom of the leaderboard every single time we do one of these. With a strange feel and a lack of really anything, the TM comes in at number 9. The Suzuki comes in at 8th with its heavy feel and lack of power. Coming in at 7th, a wide steering and heavy feel keeps the Honda out of the top 5. Honestly, for me, this is a huge surprise. The Fantic comes in at a solid 6th with overall decent stats and lap times, but not good enough to break into that top 5 either. 5th place goes to the extremely powerful and equally hard to hold on to Yamaha. The Gas Gas could be the best bike in the field with some love and attention to the suspension and power delivery. But for now, in its stock form, we're bringing it in at the 4th place. Last year's model KTM really shined at Hangtown, and because of that performance, it earned itself the number 3 spot. The Kawasaki takes home 2nd place. It easily could have won as well, but I just think the number 1 spot has more potential. But man, the Cowie is a solid pick. Taking home number 1 spot, we have the Husqvarna. It didn't do well at the sandbox, but with some tweaks, this bike is and will be incredible. Overall, the Husky just outperformed, put down faster lap times, and just felt like the best bike.